immediate law of our present day allegiance, citizenship, also our descent. So now it puts some of us in a catch-22, because if we don't agree to what was said on our behalf, we're still held accountable to it. So when we say that we are Moorish American, that's our free national name, then we have to at least be able to explain the law that was laid down for that particular nation. Just like the United States of America Constitution. We might not agree to everything about it, but for argument's sake, we have to at least agree to it. That's the catch-22 I'm saying. Same thing with the divine constitution and bylaws. If you don't agree to everything, that's cool, but you can't make that public announcement that you disagree with it. Because the Constitution is a public declaration based off your nationality and your status. So you don't want to be in contradiction by saying that you don't go by certain acts, but at the same time, it explains your nationality. Now you're put in a hard place that you got to explain that, especially lawfully. So it says the Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites. The highlight in that statement is the word ancient. Now, this is our Constitution saying that the Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites. That puts emphasis on the word Moabites. Because now you're not just saying the people known as Moabites. You're going into their descendants. You're going into the pre-Moabite history. You're talking about the ancient Moabites now. Who are they? That's what we have to investigate. Well, it wasn't a question, but just saying that leads that's subject to an examination by each and every one of us. Brother Omar, you was going to say something?
Yes. And you see that's also in the 101s and 28, where I say, why did Allah send Jesus to this earth to save the Israelites from the iron hand of Persian repelled nations of Europe who were governing a portion of Palestine at that time? Is that more specifically why he put the word Israelites there as well, to kind of connect that to who those ancient peoples were?
Absolutely.
On those land masses.
Absolutely. Islam. Because once you get into Moabite history, then you'll realize who the Moabites were in relation to the Israelites. Because that's the same time era. And they occupied at a certain time the same land. So again, that's history, but that's history that we have to know. And then, like you said, if the lesson says Allah sent Jesus to the earth to save the Israelites, then you got to understand what was Jesus' nationality according to that lesson, and the relationship between Jesus and those Israelites. That also becomes into question. So that's Act 6, right? So if the Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites, that kind of like, if that's what's proclaimed in our Constitution, then that seems like that holds more weight than Moroccan itself. That's my opinion, but I'm asking you, do you see it that way?
I didn't hear it.
If, according to the record, our divine constitution, which is our law of the land, right? If it's saying that the Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites, if that's what the declaration, if that was the choice of words to explain who the Moorish Americans are, I said it would seem like the Moorish that the Moabites has more significance than the word Moroccan itself.
Right. I agree.
But just if you're looking from the outside in and you're trying to get a understanding of who these people are, and you read the law to try to get that understanding, it's showing that according to how it's written, that the Moabites has more weight than Moroccan itself.
Absolutely.
However, we are descendants of Moroccans, though. But however, according to what we just explained, the Moabites holds more weight than Moroccan.
Than Moroccans, right? It does. They are the mothers and fathers of the Moroccan.
Yes, we know that, Islam, but we're talking about timeline and us just knowing that timeline in history.
I agree, Grand Chief.
Islam.
Moabite will supersede the term.
And maybe that's a better term. Thank you. Islam. In law, it would be supersede.
Yes.
However, it's still relevant.
Still relevant, yes, of course.
And I'm going to go into something else. And I'm going to go back to question number 31, based off what we're talking about. The modern name for Moabites is Moroccan.
Moroccan, absolutely.
So what he did was skip Moroccan and say that the Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites.
That's right.
So timeline, we know that it went from Moorish American to Moroccan.
Yes.
But Moroccan goes into ancient Moabite or ancient Moabite. So what he did was just skip the word Moroccan altogether and put Moorish Americans or descendants of the ancient Moabite. So if we're Moorish American now because we are descendants of Moroccans and born in America, but we're in all actuality descendants of the ancient Moabites, then we could have also been declared and known as Moabite American.
Absolutely.
That could have been a choice. That could have been an option, right? If the term Moroccan wasn't used. You could have just bypassed that in nationality form and put Moabite American, which would still be proper. And will really be more proper. You understand? But at one time we was our nationality was Moabites.
Absolutely.
As well as at one time our nationality was Moroccan. So we were all of these nationalities through time. We were known by all of these names during time. So now I'm going to go into just a regular Encyclopedia Britannica. And I looked up Moab, and I'm going to read to you what it says. We're still trying to get an understanding of Moorish American. That takes a lot of study, right? That's a whole lot to deal with by itself. And then we want to go back into the next timeline, which is Moroccan. That's a whole nother lifetime of study, if you will, right? Now you're talking about go further back and go into Moabite history. So now you can look at me and say, well, we don't have time for all that. Who has time to study like that? But you really don't have physical time to study like that. That's why it says masterminds trace themselves backwards through the ages, and thus they know. So you have to speed up your vibration to become a mastermind.
Absolutely.
The answer is not just go get as much books as you can and just start reading, but really cut that out, cut the middleman out, and just raise your vibration. And thus you know. But until then, we have the books as a reference. Like Jesus and Barato had the debate going on. And Verado told him, from the time we remember not, the precept told us so.
Therefore,
And
we
Jesus
know.
cut that right out. You don't know because somebody else told you. If man knows, he must be that which he knows. So that really raises the bar on education, on us, and on unfoldment. Because what he's really saying is, if you are Moorish American, then you need to be that which you know. Don't give me the book. Don't give me the quote. Don't give me the constitution behind that. Just give it to me raw.
That's right.
And that's what it forces us to do and to be, is to be Moors for real. Regardless of what the book say, we should be that walking example of what we read. The book shouldn't have more integrity than we do. I always say that. The symbol shouldn't have more integrity than we do. Man came before the symbols.
Absolutely.
Man came before the book. So let's go back into Mobite, into the encyclopedia. Who's in the
Whether or not we.
so. All right, so Moabite. Well, this is the definition of Moab, the word Moab. It says the name of an ancient people. I want you to listen to this carefully. Moab, according to the encyclopedia, is the name of an ancient people and occasionally of their country. And I want to read, I'm going to reread that, and then I'm going to give you my demonstration behind that. It's coded, but you have to listen carefully. It did not say anything about Moab, the country, or the kingdom directly. When it mentioned country, it said occasionally. I'm going to read it. Listen again. The name of an ancient people, period. Then it says, and occasionally of their country. Did you hear it?
Occasionally, yes. Oh.
You hear it, right? You got to listen carefully. You got to read in between the lines. The name of an ancient people, period. That's the definition. Then it says, and occasionally of their country. So they're telling you that the name of the country actually is secondary.
Right.
And is really not the focus point. And it significantly means more of an ancient people than it is of the name of the country itself. So Moab means an ancient people, according to them. It says, i.e., the highlands east of the Dead Sea. That's location, geographically speaking, is concerned. Of their, if you want to use the word territory. It says, apart from the Moabite stone and some fragmentary inscriptions, no Moabite literature has survived. I'm going to repeat that as well. Listen up, Morse. Apart from the Moabite stone and some fragmentary inscriptions, no Moabite literature has survived. Do we understand that?
Yes.
Can you read that again?
Say it again though.
Still dealing with the word Moab.
Apart from the Moabite stone, right?
Apart from the Moabite stone and some fragmentary inscriptions, no Moabite literature has survived.
Wow. So that is smooth. Yes.
Listen. It goes further.
Mm.
The main source of information about Moab is in the Old Testament.
Ruth.
Not necessarily just Ruth. They have a book of Ruth, yes. But the Old Testament
Period.
means the old body. That's what the Old Testament of the Bible represents. The old body, the old self, or the ancient you. It's real important to understand this connection on why this is even in your declaration of your history. And this is why Drew Ali also says that do not throw away your Bibles. The lesson right here is telling you, just explaining to you from another angle of Drew Ali. It's telling you that no Moabite literature has survived. It's saying exact words, I don't want to misinterpret it. It says the main source of information about the Moabs is the Old Testament. So it's telling you the only way that you're going to really recover your true history about Moorish American is in the Old Testament. Yes, sir.
That's why the prophet said, go back to the mindset of your ancient foremothers and forefathers.
Absolutely.
It's telling us to go back to our ancient body or consciousness.
Absolutely. And it's further coded than that it needs to be explained. You know, it gets more into more of an added understanding. And we're just not there yet. But from the surface of it, in order to explain the ground floor declaration about Moorish American, you got to be able to know the Old Testament, is what they're telling you. And Drew Ali told you the same thing.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And I say it all the time that we can't be spooked up with the Bible because of what's in it, what needs to be uncoded.
That's it. That's it.
You know, somebody might look at the Bible and say, well, it don't say the word more, so I'm not interested. And when you do that, you miss the whole lesson.
But it's called throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
And the Bible is what they refer to as the greatest story ever told. But the problem is, as a people, we don't make connection with that story because of the way it's interpreted and coded. So we don't view it as the greatest story ever told. I'm just saying collectively, we care less. However, our salvation lies within the inner meanings of it, because it shows us how to unfold. And we still can't see that because, again, that's kind of like saying it, that's connecting us back to Christianity. But that's not what it's doing.
No.
You can't even have that conversation with people if they're not already past that a certain point. So it's still not public. It's not even public teaching, and it's not. I'm just showing us the purpose of me bringing this back is it's the root, it's the foundation of your studying. And we first have to accept that in order to go in it to be able to learn more. So I'm going to read on. It says the main source of the information about Moab is in the Old Testament, supplemented by a few data from Assyrian and Egyptian documents, and the results of modern archaeology research. So I'm going to brief down. It says, toward the end of the 14th century BC, a new civilization appeared, that of the Moabites. Nothing is known about the descent of this people, representing Moab and Ammon, as sons of Lot, the nephew of Abraham, going back to Genesis. It says, Israel expressed its conviction that those two people belong to the same ethnic group as itself. It is also maintained the tradition that the Moabites were already settled and organized into a kingdom while the Israelites were still on their journey to the country God had designated for them.
Islam.
Back to what Brother Omari was just talking about, knowing the distinction between the Israelites and the Moabites, and also understanding why Allah sent Jesus to the earth to save those Israelites.
Yep.
But that goes into a story, and we're not going to get into that at the moment. It says, from the fragmentary traditions about the route through Moabite territory as preserved in Numbers, it may be gathered that while the southern border of Moab was always the wide valley, precipitous sides now called Wadi al-Hessa, the brook of Zerad of Numbers, which you can find that in the book of Numbers in the Bible, separating Moab from Edom. The northern frontier was fluctuating. It is said that the Amorite king Sihon threw the Moabites back southward behind the Arnon. And we don't really need to get into that now. That's not the lesson is about. There may be some connection between this fact and that the tradition which gives the Moabite Ruth a place among David's ancestors, which is in the book of Ruth and is also in Chronicles. And it gives a lot of information behind that, but I'm gonna just cut that short. And I'm gonna go back into the lessons of the day. Moab has several different meanings, physically and metaphysically. And that wasn't the first appellation that we went by either. Because we know now going further, the Moabites was descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. So when you get into ancient maps and ancient texts, you'll see where Palestine was, where Canaan was. You'll see where Moab was. You'll see where the Dead Sea was. You'll see where the Jordan River was. And you'll start to make this connection on where were these people that they were talking about. And they were all in that same region or same area, of which we call now Sudan, Egypt, etc., Mecca, Arabia, Islam. But it's talking about the same people. So it's just to show us that, we have to make a connection first to see that we existed and it's a significance in that land. Because we look at it as we start reading this Bible and other scriptures and we start thinking, oh, this don't have nothing to do with us.
Exactly.
We Americans, we from Africa, and this has nothing to do with us. And regardless of what name they're using, it's still talking about your ancestors.
Absolutely.
If we say we are the original man, then it's who are you talking about then? It's still us.
Right.
Because the original man had names. Original man had nationalities.
Exactly.
They had children. They had seeds. And then they went on to do stuff and have families. Who were they? What were their names? But it's coded and it's also Masonically coded.
Absolutely.
So your declaration of your nationality is not just a political statement, but it's also a fraternal statement.
Absolutely.
Also a divine and spiritual statement, metaphysical statement. It has so many statements all in one that according to who you talking to perceives it the way that they understand, according to what level, what school of thought that they come from. It's how they perceive it. So you're talking to many different levels when you make these statements. And most of the time, we don't know that the level someone else is on when we're talking to them. So you don't know what they're thinking. You're just talking and making statements, but you don't really know what level they're on and where they're going with that. So now they want to question you on their level, but we might not be skilled on that level. That's why it's so important that we have to embrace these different schools of thoughts and these lessons behind what we're saying, because we don't know where we're going to get caught at.
True.
And it's not about getting caught and being successful. At the end of the day, it's about teaching. So we also have to correct concepts and teach people about who they are. And in order to do that, we have to be well-rounded so that we can pull them up out of their school of thought and be able to offer some intelligent conversation about who they are, what their misconception is about who they are. Islam? So the nationality card says we honor all true and divine prophets. Right?
Yes.
So within these prophets that are mentioned, each prophet was sent to a land, to a nation, to a people. So it's important to try to understand something about the prophets and their mission. Like it says, why did Allah send Jesus? That's that particular prophet. Why did Allah send Jesus to the earth? Well, he sent Jesus to the earth to save the Israelites that were governing a portion of Palestine at that time. But now here's the science behind that. Each prophet was sent to a different portion.
That's right.
To deal with a certain people because of the issues of that day.
That's right.
So when we say we honor all true and divine prophets, that means that we should know something about all of these prophets and where they went. Who did they deal with and what time frame did they deal with this? Because that's where your religions are rooted in. So everybody you meet and greet with is saying that they from this religion, then that religion is rooted in some type of time era with some type of prophet to back it. So if you want to talk to them, build with them, and bring them up out of that, you got to be able to know something about their religion. Show them where their prophet was at, who did they come to, or who did he come to, and what issues of the day was he dealing with. Jesus came based off slavery. We can break that down. We can prove that. We got the lessons to back that. So for anybody saying that they love Jesus and they follow Jesus, they should be talking, anti-slavery talk. Because that was what Jesus' mission was, according to the scripture. He didn't come for another agenda. Islam?
He said I didn't come to change the law, but to do it.
Islam. Any questions so far?
So,
Islam, man.
going back to the Moabite,
Mhm.
I believe in the Bible, Abraham had a son by Hagar, if I remember her name. She was a Moabite. And Hagar, that's enough, Hagar. She was a Moabite. Yeah, she had a son by the name of Ishmael. And I heard of it also in, I believe, 5 Pillars of the Eastern Star, where they had the group of Moabites. It speaks on that, so they understand. It's all in the scriptures.
Yeah, absolutely. And to give a reference to what you're saying, we're going to chapter 45 of the Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And I'll be right with you more. I just want to give some additional feedback on the brother's bill. So it says, Ayat 3. The Egyptians who were the Hamathites and a direct descendants of Misraim. The Arabians were the seed of Hagar, Japanese and Chinese.
That's right.
So that's also what they call modern day Asian.
Right.
But we know that that's Asian is still Asiatic. And Abraham is referred to in the Bible as the father of nations. So this is where so-called Jews are rooted within declaring Abraham as the father and acknowledging that. When they say honor thy fathers and their mothers, they honor Abraham as the father of the nations. And they're claiming the birthright. This is also where birthright and inheritance come in at. This is why so-called Jews claim the land. Not just this land, but the lands plural. They claim earth. They claim land, period, because they're claiming they're the first seeds of Abraham. So they're saying that by birthright and inheritance, they're entitled to the deed of the land. They're claiming they have allodial possession to the land by being Jew. So the whole, and I don't want to downplay and I don't want to talk negative about anybody, but the whole acknowledgement of the birthright goes to the classification of Jew. So this is why Jews get first, I don't want to say first dibs, but they get a lot of recognition when it comes to land, finances, and wealth. Because that's what they teach their children from day one. You are the seed, and you are entitled to the birthright inheritance, and this is yours. And your teaching is to claim all of this. So that's the mission from day one. Which again, now you got to get into who the Moors are, because that's our lesson. However, they're claiming it. They've been rolling with it for a very long time. So now we're trying to come with a counterclaim saying, no, we're the original Jews, which we are. But we're too far in the game to just come take something that's being acknowledged.
Exactly.
We got to do it through here.
That's right.
We can't just go, well, I'm a Moor and this is mine now. And you can't just do it like that. You know what I mean? We can't just squat on the property like that.
That's
on
right.
the land. We got to really take it back through intelligence. And but the whole object is that we are the Jews. We know that.
Absolutely.
The original ones. The Moabites are the original Jews. And you go into the Bible, it'll explain that. There's no secret.
No, it's no secret.
But again, this is what the code is within what we're reading. It's saying there's no history, there's no literature left to survive behind the Moabites. So nobody can prove who these people really were. And what's going on with them, because that literature was buried, it was burnt, it was,
Yeah, they
we
burnt
know
it.
that science too. But that's the history that was lost.
That's right. Go ahead, Grant.
That's the history. That's a lot of your lost books of the Bible is really what they're talking about. What didn't make the Bible was buried and burned. That's Moabite history, Moabite literature. That's what didn't make it. What they call the missing years of Jesus. Well, Jesus was a Moabite.
Islam.
So if you got missing years of, why you got missing years? You claim to know everything about Jesus. How come you got missing years of Jesus?
Islam.
Why is it missing? So it's coded, is what the lesson is. It's highly coded. Drew Ali is bringing back the notes behind this, that we got to recollaborate this information, put it back together. Everything is not going to be in black and white, and it takes a mastermind to restore the heritage of man. Islam, I didn't want to miss your thought.
Yes. First, all praise is due to Allah. Honor to the Grand, to Noble Drew Ali. Honor to the Grand Sheikhs, and to all those that are present here today and everything that pertains to Islam. One of the things that I was thinking in the Bible, it says that the only way is through Jesus. Jesus came to save, and the only way through, they say, God, Allah, heaven, or whatever, is through Jesus. Now, could it be that that statement is coded and it's actually talking about when he was brought to a particular land because he had come to save them out of slavery? Could it be that that saving of them is talking about slavery and talking about him being the only one, because no one else at that time was showing any effort or reaching out to deliver us from slavery? Could it be that that's what they're talking about when he says Jesus is the only way and he come to save us?
Yes.
Where it's been misinterpreted that he's come to save us and he's the only way back to his Father, Allah.
Both, because Jesus has different meanings.
He's justice.
Yes, we know that, but Jesus, according to the school of thought, Jesus does mean different things. All right, so physically, Jesus has a meaning, and metaphysically, Jesus has a meaning. And I'm gonna give you a couple different interpretations behind that as soon as we get still in here. So one quick lesson, again, repeating it, just give it clarity. We honor all true and divine prophets, right? So we know prophets work through successorship. Prophets are also spiritual messengers, angelic beings, and they also are reincarnated energies. So a true and divine prophet is one prophet. They might have different names and different scriptures at different time periods, but you're talking about one energy, one spirit that remanifested in a different time zone, etc. So to a master, when you say, just dealing with science, when you say Prophet Jesus or Jesus, you also saying Prophet Muhammad. You also saying Prophet Buddha, because it's one energy. You know, just like it's one God. Although people might call God by different names, we believe it's all one God. It's even one religion. Although that people will divide it and call it different names, but masters know it as one, right? That's one thought. So Jesus' mission to the earth was no different from any of the other prophets' mission to the earth. They just come at a different time era, looking different according to the territory, the land, the people, etc. So I'm answering your question. Just follow me on this. So Jesus being the savior of humanity, like the church demonstrates or teaches, is very coded because it's true, but it's not Jesus as what they describe Jesus to be. Jesus could be any angelical reincarnated being that comes with that particular mission to save or to liberate the people. So it's not just personally attached to who they say Jesus is. So Jesus is the savior of the world. That's a true statement. However, it's not the Jesus that's described as Jesus the man. It's the concept of Jesus what saves the world and is coming back, not the man. I'm gonna give you an example of this. It's probably a little early in the game to give this an example because I don't want to spoil this, but they had the movie just come out, Harriet Tubman, right? So I'm gonna just give you a quick brief, but I'm not gonna tell you the movie because I don't want to spoil it. However, we understand that Harriet Tubman is famous for freeing the slaves. They said she led the Underground Railroad, right? Which the Underground Railroad was a movement. And the movement was a physical movement of physically freeing slaves, but the Underground Railroad is also a metaphysical movement. So it's working two different poles at the same time. And we must understand this. It's always been, but it's also on an elite level. Noble Drew Ali is an example of Harriet Tubman on a metaphysical scale. Had the same mission and did the same type of work. And Drew Ali was a leader of the Underground Railroad in 1913. However, that's another demonstration that's on another level. So Noble Drew Ali made the statement that he was Jesus 2,000 years ago. And he says that he's better than he was before. Metaphysical statement. It's not ego tripping or anything else like that. It's understanding energy. It's the same spirit.
That's right.
The same spirit. In the movie, Harriet Tubman was an original name. You'll learn that later. But she started off after freeing these slaves and got the name or chose the name Harriet Tubman once she became free. So once she declared her freedom, she chose the name Harriet Tubman. Now, the key to the story is once she started to initiate or what you would call not initiate, once she started to lead and take over the Underground Railroad, because the Underground Railroad was already in existence prior to her coming into it or joining it. She was initiated into the Underground Railroad. Now, once she did that, because of her status and what the work she was doing, she took it over. Is what history doesn't really explain, but the movie does. But once she took it over and proved herself, the slave masters started to refer to her as Moses. Moses was a prophet. So what I'm trying to explain is based off your question is, although she was Harriet Tubman in physical form, and that was the name and appellation she went by, the slave masters referred to her as Moses because of the spirit of Moses and what Moses did. Moses was known for freeing the slaves. So when you talk about Jesus or any prophet, a prophet is really a spiritual and a physical liberator. That's the mission of any true and divine prophet. They're liberators. They're social reformers. They come to free the people, and that is their only mission. They don't come to live a life of folly. They come to liberate masses of people in a quick time period, and then they're done. That's the mission of a true prophet. Not somebody claiming to be a prophet. Somebody who is a proven prophet is a direct messenger or an employee of God. They're beyond the physical realm.
Yes.
They come with a mission, and they're divinely inspired to come do a job directly for God, and they're going to carry out that mission according to God's plan, not man's plan. They have the will of God, and they come and do their job. That's a true spiritual liberator. And when you read all of the prophets of the days, they all had the same exact mission.
That's right.
So they're one spirit, called by many names in different time periods. That's not the whatever name they went by is really not the focus point. Once you know, you can care less about the name. Jesus is Moses. No question, no difference. Just different time period. Noble Drew Ali is Moses. Moses' other appellation is Akhenaten.
Akhenaten, man.
So once you know that and start putting the pieces together, it's Moses in the Bible, but Moses is the Egyptian name Akhenaten. The same spirit. Noble Drew Ali is Akhenaten.
And Ptah.
Islam Nawiyah.
Yeah, what I
Thank you.
wanted
Yes,
to
sir.
add on to what you was building on about Noble Drew Ali being Harriet Tubman with the same process is that her real name is Araminta Ross. And she transitioned out of the flesh March 10th, 1913.
Absolutely.
And that was the same year Drew Ali set up the old Canaanite temple.
That's right.
To resurrect that same spirit to continue us under the railroad.
Islam.
Islam.
Harriet Tubman passed form, which we call transition or die, died in 1913. So in the same year, Drew Ali set up the first Moorish Science Temple.
Islam.
So understanding successorship, the mission continued, or I don't even want to use the word mission. This is another term that we have to understand. It's called a movement. This is a Moorish divine and national movement. That movement is just not a catchy term. That's really a political and spiritual statement. A movement. We are involved in a movement. So outside of us proclaiming our nationality, just to better our status, is bigger than that. We're also contributing to a movement. It's a divine movement. It means that this movement is everlasting, which means that it didn't start in 1913, and it's not going to. It didn't end when Drew Ali passed form, and it don't end when we pass form. It's eternal. A movement is eternal. This type of movement is eternal. So throughout time, it just went by different names. And again, the Underground Railroad was just one of the names of the Moorish Divine and National Movement. But our job, according to Act 6 of the Constitution, is no secret, is to free the slaves.
Islam.
It's right in our literature.
Yep, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed.
Upliftment of fallen humanity.
Drew Ali was manifested in flesh to help free the slaves. And he said that in numerous literature, but Act 6, it really explains it, clear as day. The Negro, Black, and colored names that we're associated with are names that allude to what?
Slavery.
And he said, this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim. But it's not just the name you're proclaiming, but it's also the status, the culture, and everything else. So it's really telling you that you must end slavery. The real uncoded message of the lessons and our nationality is to stop slavery, to put an end to slavery and all its ways and actions and forms associated with it. And that's real. I mean, like, that's so real that's why a lot of people are still afraid of it, because of what it really entails that you must do. When you put this turban and fez on, what you're telling them is you're part of the movement to end slavery. So now the relationship between the slaveholder and the ex-slave, was a brutal one. We know that is a metaphysical lesson in the Quran about it. It says, he who stepped on the Roman seal meant death to him. And that's why people didn't want to leave the plantation, because they were afraid of what may happen if they got caught. It's not that they didn't want to be free, but they were afraid of the consequences to run. And in the movie, they told Harriet that fear was your worst enemy.
Wow.
When she told them that she was about to run, that was their advice. That was the last thing that was told to her before she ran. Was fear is your worst enemy. And that's what keeps a lot of us from proclaiming. That's what keeps a lot of us putting both feet in it, going head on with this, and starting to free people. Because what we're doing is freeing people. So there's a lot of opposition to that, which we know. There's a lot of consequences that we know. So I tell people straight up like it is. This is a fight. This is not coming in to sleep on roses. That's not what this is about. Although we would like that, but that's not really what we're signing up for. And that's why Drew Ali also says that, you can turn in your card and button and cease wearing a turban and fez and return back to the state where I found you. If you're not going to do nothing, if you're not going to participate, there's no sense of doing this. This is not just to, have a nice ID with a Moorish appellation on it. That's not what this is about. Same thing with Abraham Lincoln. He was also a social reformer and political one. And because of that, what occurred? He was assassinated. Even reformers that might not be divinely prepared, but just tapping in and doing that work, same thing. And that's why some of them become agents. They have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they claim like they're doing the work, but they really still participating on another level. It's a lot of different participations out here. And now you gotta worry about divine karma, according to what part you want to play. You can't just be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because that's when it's worse. That's when it's worse. A lot of and people need to understand this, because the opposition they have politically is related to what I'm talking about. We call these documents that we have proclamations. Somebody called the other day talking about, do you guys do proclamation papers? And I had to correct the concept, because it's just like your concepts are wrong about what this is all about. And there's consequences based off what you say. And you just can't call me saying something like that, because, I'm not going to put myself out there like that. So to somebody that I don't know, I mean, do we do that? It's a process. This is a movement. Do you want to join the movement? Do you want to proclaim your nationality? These are different statements. Right. This is what we are to say. But your words can get you in trouble. But back in the days of the time that they called slavery, they had what they call freedom papers. So if a so-called slave wanted to be acknowledged as free, then they had to have what they call freedom papers. And they had to walk around with these freedom papers because if they were questioned on who you belong to, they had to declare themselves as a free man or a free woman. And then they had to prove it, so they want to see their paperwork. So they pull out their freedom papers. You know, so again, a lot of it has similarities. And we're dealing with modern days of times. So we got to know that we have evolved from some parts of the institution of slavery. However, it does exist still.
Right, absolutely.
And you have modern day papers now. You have modern day status that you have to proclaim. You have modern day names that you must proclaim. So all of this counters the slavery, the status of slave. So again, this goes on to a political level because we've been talking about elections. It's no coincidence that this movie even comes out right before elections.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to prejudice the minds of the people. Got to understand, we are in a state where citizens exercise their will, which is their choice, to choose, because we say we're in a representative government. That's the republic form of government. So is the government of the people, supposed to be. So now is a time where that is supposed to be acknowledged, where you go out and choose your representatives. So you have to be in the right state of mind or some state of mind to choose somebody. So now what you're hearing on TV, television, commercials, and all over the place, advertisements on the lawns, they're talking about it in school, they're talking about it on some of the workplaces, and even in the movies now. So they're trying to change your mind or program your mind to vote in one direction or even not to vote at all.
That's right.
And this is a lot of why the slavery stuff is coming out now, because now they're trying to take what they call the lower class and the minority population, trying to prejudice their mind and get them emotional, where they don't trust Europeans and they won't go vote at all because there's no one to vote for, which allows them to get the more votes in the direction which they need to carry out a certain agenda.
That's right. That's right.
So it's sorcery.
Yes, it's sorcery. Absolutely. High sorcery.
It's definitely high sorcery.
No doubt about it.
And it works.
Absolutely. Absolutely it works. Fans bust about it.
So read the news, listen to the news, look at what's been going on over the past couple of weeks. Look who they say they wouldn't capture.
That's
they did
right.
this and that too, and just look at what's going on.
Exactly.
The political moves that's being made. It's no coincidence. So again, this is, we're for peace and not destruction. So we're not teaching hatred or nothing like that. We want to deal with love. We want to teach love, and we want to have a heart of love. But so we have to be intelligent in order to do that. And just, again, at the same time, teach our people to do the same. That way the seeds that we plant will be fruits of love. It wouldn't be anything else, because that's not, we want to be free. Just keeping it real. There's no way to sugarcoat that. But within in the path of freedom, we still have to deal with it intelligently and make sure that we don't reenact bad karma in doing so. Which I think, and I don't think, but I know Drew Ali carried out his program very well. Speaking of movement, the word movement, if someone can look that up, the word movement, and then I'm going to give you something that I have on it.
We don't.
Yes, sir.
We don't vote.
When you say we, who's we?
More.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. We vote in. I thought the corporate ward, there was a difference between corporate ward citizens and ward.
There is a difference between corporate wards.
Yeah.
Corporate wards shouldn't vote. Corporate wards shouldn't have the right to vote because a corporate ward is an artificial person, and an artificial person is not a natural person. The only people who can vote are natural people. But I understand what you're saying. I'm just putting it in proper perspective. That the people who are voting really shouldn't be voting. So we don't want to take the position and not to vote because of the game they're playing. We are encouraged and we should vote because in all actuality, we are the only ones that should be voting. I know it probably needs further explanation, but we can build about that later. But this is a republic form of government, right? Which means in a republic form of government, everybody is encouraged to vote and supposed to vote. And that's also how they judge citizenship and your participation in citizenship if you're active in affairs of men. That's not my opinion. Just to give you some further background, back in 1928 and 1929, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, when he was in the flesh, he influenced thousands of Moorish Americans to vote. And they voted as Republican. Just for factual background that you can investigate. And the reasons why and all of that, again, that can go into a whole nother lesson. But to answer your question, yes, Moors are supposed to vote. Because Moors are true citizens. That right was taken away from us during the time of slavery. So because we regained our freedom back, then we're supposed to regain all our rights back and exercise those rights. And voting is one of them.
Absolutely. 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 Very well put, Rashi.
The Constitution was revised or amended, or the term they use, adopted in 1787.
Superseded. That's true.
So within that Constitution, they agreed that all men was equal and free, which goes back to earlier than 1787, but I'm just making a statement that this modern day republic government, regardless of what transitions it went through, they still claim that it's in effect. So because of the claim and they're acting as if it is valid and still standing, they're still held accountable to the principles of the Constitution, regardless of how corporate or whatever they did after the fact. Every citizen is still held accountable to the constitutional standards of law. That cannot change, regardless of the money system, the bankruptcy, regardless of what occurs. That's the supreme law of the land. To say that the government is not in existing, or to just hypothetically speaking now, to say that the republic government is not into effect is a statement of martial law. To say that the republic don't exist means that it's free fall. It means that you have no recourse and no protection to law. It means that it's military rule, which some of us might say it is. But I'm just saying that you have to, as long as you can, enforce and hold on to the constitutional standards of law while it's still acknowledged. Because if it comes to a time where it's not acknowledged at all, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
There will be a whole different society.
Definitely.
So we talk about those things, but we have not seen it yet in full-fledged. So again, yes, we know they pick and choose when they want to use one and use the other. Absolutely. But however, as of right now, it's still a declaration that the government and the Constitution is still intact. And when it comes to a point when it's not, trust me, you'll know it.
Then big trouble.
Because it wouldn't be about whether or not we should vote or not. No one would be voting. There wouldn't be a poll at all. There wouldn't be seats of government at all, because during martial law, all that's suspended. The president by default becomes chief commander. In Congress, and nobody has no say so. That's what it looks like. Be careful what you say. That's what it looks like. But that's not what it is at the moment. When it is like that, you would know it. There will be no secret behind it. That's what I'm saying. You wouldn't be able to travel here from your territory if that was the case. You wouldn't be people at the toll booth collecting money. It would be military there.
That's right.
Question you where you going.
Where you going? That's right.
Major curfews.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't even be sitting here talking like this.
No. Oh no.
No happened.
Some people outside your door with rifles. Don't come out the house.
During the Moabite time, I'm gonna read you exact words. It says probably the Moabites took part in the movement of revolt, which followed Solomon's death, and again took possession of the territory north of the Arnon, and they had lost since the time of David. I just went back into the Moabite scriptures real quick, just to highlight the movement of revolt. That's something you have to look up. Throughout times, every time a revolution took place or something, it was done through the spearhead of some type of movement.
Absolutely.
So again, I'm reintroducing to us the term movement and what a movement really is. Because a lot of us are confused on what the word movement is. And by being a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, you automatically a part of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, which means that you got to know what a movement is. It's just something that's just thrown out there, but it's not really understood that you're part of a movement. Just like the Moabites was part of the movement of revolt. Just like the slaves was a part of the movement of the Underground Railroad. There's a movement that goes with freeing slaves. So we need to know what type of movement we're really dealing with, because politicians, when they hear the word movement, they know exactly what's going on. People who are skilled know that, and they suit up for stuff like that. We, lollygagging, not saying all of us, but just in general, we walking around lollygagging and saying we're part of a movement and don't really know what statement we're making. That's a problem, because now you're off guard. And if you're questioning on something and you just miscellaneously talking, you don't know what you're talking about. Exactly. Somebody might be questioning you based off a mission, and you don't understand what their mission is. And you don't have the proper defense now because you don't even see it coming. Islam, sis, pardon me.
Just you asked for the definition of movement.
Yes.
It says movement or motion is the state of changing someone's position. That is, changing where something is. A flying bird or a walking person are moving because they change where they are from one place to another.
Mm-hmm.
There are many kinds of science and math related to movement. And then further it goes down to say the 4 types of social movements discussed are alternative, redemptive, reformative,
Mm.
and revolutionary.
Oh, I like the latter too.
Alternative movements are at the individual level and advocate for minor changes. Redemptive social movements are at the individual level and advocate for radical changes.
Islam. Was there a hand up? Anybody?
No.
Islam.
Go ahead.
All right. So there's another movement called the Freeman's Bureau. Y'all familiar with that?
The who?
Freeman's Bureau.
No.
You heard of it. We dealt with that years ago.
Okay, it's been a long time.
But free man, right? Free man or free men's.
Bro, yes.
Same thing.
Okay. I know.
But the concept is to be free, right? That was a movement.
Is that part of the Freemen's and Refugee?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now I know you're using online, but can you give me the definition or look up political movement?
So, Wikipedia. This is political movement. In social science, a political movement is a social group that operates together to obtain a political goal and a local, regional, national, or international scope.
So that's all it is.
It keeps going on. It's on a local, regional, national, or international scope, political movements develop, coordinate, promulgate, revise, amend, interpret, and produce materials that are intended to address the goals of the base of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
A social movement in the area of politics can be organized around a single issue or set of issues, or around a set of shared concerns of a social group.
Mm-hmm.
In a political party, a political organization seeks to influence or control government policy, usually by nominating their candidates
Mm-hmm.
and seating candidates in politics and governmental offices.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, parties participate in electoral campaigns and educational outreach or protest actions aiming to convince citizens or governments to take action or on the issues.
Here, Islam, listen to this closely. Repeat that paragraph, please.
Usually it says government policy, usually by nominating their candidates and seating candidates. It says government policy, usually by nominating their candidates and seating candidates in politics and governmental offices. Additional parties.
You gotta call it first.
Yeah.
Additional parties participate in electoral campaigns and educational outreach or protest actions aiming to convince citizens or governments to take action.
Convincing citizens to take action.
And governments to take action.
Listen.
Take action on the issues and concerns which are the focus of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
Parties often espouse an ideology expressed in a party program, bolstered by a written platform with specific goals,
Mhm.
forming a coalition among disparate interests.
So you get another understanding of this movement now?
Absolutely.
Islam.
Yes. I just want to bring up a point.
Mhm.
Just listening recently to a YouTube video where Yanchi Street Bay is with other Moors from the Moor Science Temple, and it was a discussion of, from what I can get, it was a discussion of the type of teaching. So,
Mhm.
of what I've read on my own and listening to that conversation, it was a discussion of the movement or the Moor Science Temple as being a body politic or being a civics organization in the beginning.
Mhm.
And it was not until later that it became, the body politic.
Mhm.
But before, it was for that social reform
Mhm.
projection, if you will, by knowing and being familiar with the Constitution,
Mhm.
so that you will know the law of the land and be able to govern themselves accordingly in the affairs of men.
Mhm. Islam.
It's a
So,
movement to begin with from the political perspective.
well,
One of the periods.
the movement was incorporated in 1916. So officially, the movement, the Moors Divine and National Movement, officially kicked off as a word movement in the year 1916. The temple started in 1913. So now to clarify both arguments that you were talking about, it's in writing, it's clear, it's not an opinion. 3 years after he launched the Moor Science Temple, which was known as the Old Canaanite Temple, 3 years later, it was enough people involved that it transitioned into a movement. So before you can have a movement, you first have to get enough people to back that idea. So just understanding how a movement works is explainable on why you don't start a movement just with one or two people and just walk out into the street and say, well, we got a movement going on. You can call it a movement because it is moving, but it wasn't recognized legally as a movement until the year 1916. And those are the facts. So yes, the temple, the whole structure of the gathering, like you said, was to get the people involved, get enough numbers necessary to start a certain idea or agenda. So you have to start it with what you got, and then as things progress, it transitions into other things. Until 1928, it officially became a nation. So 1913, the organization started as far as organizing and having meetings. 1916, it gathered up enough people to start a movement. And that's when he also reincorporated certain things like the seals and stuff like that, certain things he was establishing along the way. And then 1928 was enough things in place where it officially constituted what is legally called a nation. So that's the timeline and the dates, year dates on what certain things transition. So that's sort of what they were talking about as well. Yes.
What was it called first?
The Old Canaanite Temple. That was the first name of the temple. And then later years, names changed. It went through a couple different names until it got to where it has last been labeled as the Moor Science Temple of America.
So did the other title, the Moorish Divine, Moorish Holy Divine?
The Moorish Holy Temple of Science.
That one. So that never went away if it adopted.
Well, it transitioned from the Holy Temple of Science to the Moorish Science Temple of America. The Moorish Holy Temple of Science was a name that was used for a short amount of time, but it didn't become the legal name the legal or lawful declared name. That was a name that he was using for certain activity during a certain amount of time. Also, he used the name Moorish Temple of Science. See, the old Canaanite temple was started right here in Newark, New Jersey. So the Moorish Science Temple was originally started in Newark, New Jersey.
That's right.
This is where Drew Ali was at when he started the first temple. And then that lasted for a short amount of time because it wasn't accepted, and he dealt with a lot of opposition here in New Jersey. So he traveled with the temple concept in his meetings. He just took it out of state. It wasn't really having a set place at that time, but he was traveling and taking the work to different states until he ended up in Chicago a few years later. And that's where he remained and where he established most of the work at until he passed on. But Drew Ali was in Jersey, he was in New York.
Yeah.
He walked the streets of Harlem. He did everything we doing, but on a much broader level. You know, so he wasn't just Chicago based.
No.
Drew Ali was right here in Jersey. You know. Slum.
Wasn't there a temple in Brooklyn? A Moorish Jewish movement?
Moorish Zionist temple. Jewish Zionist temple was in Harlem. They probably had one in Brooklyn too, but the main Jewish temple was in Harlem in 1925. Islam?
I noticed that one of the Nation of Islam leaders was in there at one time.
Yeah, a few of them were. Most of the early members was.
Yes.
Yeah, the root members were FOIs as well. Islam? Any other questions before we end today's lesson? Islam, well, appreciate everybody's due diligence and patience, and trust that you will continue this on another day, another study, another journey, another plane. Islam, according to Act 3 of the additional laws, we will let the children open up for donations.
No.
And I will bring Brother Omari up to close out the meeting. So,
Islam, family. Additional laws for the Moorish Americans by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. Act 1. Grand sheikhs and governors and heads of all temples, all businesses. Each said temple must be approved by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. Before acting upon any members, let it be finance, property, or any line of life that will cause the members to sacrifice finance, etc. That will cause the support of any group of members. Any former officer that violates these laws is subject to be removed from his or her office under heavy restriction, etc. by the Prophet or the Grand Sheikh. Act 2. All members are to attend their ad hoc meetings and their public meetings promptly. If a member is found standing around on their meeting period, they shall be fined 50 cents on the first case, and on the second, they will be fined 1 note, which will go into your emergency fund. If a member is working, he or she monthly dues must be paid, and he or she has money in the bank, he or she must subscribe for as much as he or she is able to the Moorish Uplifting Fund because it takes finance to uplift the nation. Act 3. It is the lawful and divine duty of every good member, if he or she is able in finance, to aid me in saving the nation, and if he or she does not, he or she is an enemy to the cause of uplifting their own people when justice must catch you. Let it be he or she according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, as I have the power invested in my hands, and I will have to enforce the law in order to save the nation. Act 4. All members, while up making a public speech, must not use any assertion against the American flag or speak radical against the church or any member of any organized group, because we are here to teach love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Act 5. All members must promptly attend their meetings and send their children to Sunday school, and their teacher must conform to himself or herself to the questionnaire. And let every member exercise his or her 5 senses who are able to do so, because out of your Sunday school comes what?
God is a nation.
Islam. Act 6. With us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained Noble Jew Ali, the prophet, to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites whom inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Act 7. All members must promptly attend their meetings and become a part and parcel of all uplifting acts of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Members must pay their dues and keep in line with all necessities of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Then you are entitled to the name of faith. Husband, you must support your wife and children. Wife, you must obey your husband and take care of your children and look after the duties of your household. Sons and daughters must obey father and mother and be industrious and become a part of the uplifting of fallen humanity. All Moorish Americans must keep their heart and minds pure with love and their bodies clean with water. This divine covenant is from your holy prophet, Noble Jew Ali, through the guidance of his father, God Allah. Islam?
Islam.
That will conclude our meeting, Moors. I ask for all members to please rise, face the east. Feet at a 45-degree angle. 5 hands up on the left, 2 hands up on the right. 2
5
fingers
hands up
up
on
on
the
five,
left.
5 fingers up on the left and 2 fingers on the right. Part itself. Repeat after Nawiyah.
May Allah
May Allah
bind our hearts and minds.
bind our hearts and minds
Back to our ancient forefathers.
back to our ancient forefathers,
Divine creed and principle.
divine creed and principles.
This we ask.
And this we ask.
In thy holy name.
And thy holy name.
And the 7 Elohim.
And the 7 Elohims. Amen. Islam. Meetings is now closed, Morris. Straight, but you know you gotta make sure you get it right. There you go. And then hit it.